I'm Dr. Abby Radallen, a pork producer from Chatfield, Minnesota, and I serve as a director on the Minnesota Pork Board. When Pillen Family Farms, a farrow-to-finish operation in Nebraska, was trying to figure out why its new nursery barns weren't performing as well as some of their older barns, they turned to video cameras as a way to better understand the behavior of pigs when workers weren't in the barn. The application of video cameras proved to be a new avenue to apply technology to investigate and solve these problems. To share more about Pillen's utilization of video cameras within their production system, please help me in welcoming Andy Jakubowski.
Well, thanks for attending. Hopefully everybody can hear me all right. If not, just wave at me and I'll try to hold this mic a little bit better. So thanks for the introduction. So maybe a little backdrop. She sent that out just perfectly. We were really struggling. It's 2016 to 17. We decided to put all of our pigs on plastic floors. So our system's very traditional. We still run all the pigs through nurseries and then to finish. And so with the addition of building new nurseries, we had inconsistent performance across the same nurseries that were built, same style, versus ones we were still raising pigs on from the conversion. So concrete floors, slats, you name it, we had pigs kind of everywhere before we got these pigs out there, or before we got the nurseries built. And so what really happened, cameras weren't new to our system by any means. We had them in sow farms for critical control points, monitoring those areas for biosecurity. So we knew that would be an option, but we really were banging our head against the wall for many months and years, just trying to figure out how do we get consistent performance across all of our barns. And so looked at people, we looked at pig flows, and we scratched and banged our head on about everything you can think of to try to get the inconsistencies figured out, and just weren't getting there. So in 2017, we with everything we got up there, we installed about 150 video cameras through 12 different nurseries. And so maybe a little backdrop on our system. We got 264,000 spaces, and those are primarily in Nebraska. All these sites we run, they're all in, all out. So we'll stock them with multiple 5,000 sow farms. We'll have some smaller farms in our production areas that maybe some 25s or 1,000 heads that we'll mix. But all these sites are filled within a week. And then the goal is all in, all out. We'll ship them all out at the same time. Those sites are married with a finisher of equal size. So the whole goal in the process was really kill the bug loads between them, but get the acclimatization in the nursery. So all the nurseries we had, so when you looked at health, was that an issue? These were stocked. The inconsistencies were across same health pigs. So most of these sites were all negative. We spent a lot of energy in the years before this to get our sow farms negative through filtration, mycoplasma. So when we were dealing with these sites, the health of the pigs going in here, even though co-mingling was there, it was the same flows. And just flow to flow, you'd see inconsistency with those nurseries. All these nurseries are hotel style, so ventilation-wise, air's jet ventilated. So air comes in the sidewall, up into the attic, and then we bring it down through. And then as far as inventory, when you look at across them, they would range 700. We'll even go up to 1,900, just depending on some of the sites and the production we have and which finisher they're filling. But all the room inventories would be in that 700 to 1,800 typically is where we're at for stocking densities. So probably in the end, why did we put these cameras in? It was just, we were just saying, what the heck's going on here? Is it people? Is it pigs? What's really going on? We need to get a better view of what's all happening there. So in the fall, that was 2017. These cameras went in. Today, we're probably north of 450 cameras through our system in some finisher locations, and then we put a few more into sow farms. Some of that's with some acquisitions and some growth, but overall, yeah, we're in that 450, maybe even touching 500 now. Just depends on the site. So install, like I said, it wasn't new to us. Our IT teams been through this before on how we want to get cameras installed. The big thing was we want to make sure we could view out of network. So we want to make sure the guys could look at this at home and view the video and not always be in the farm to look back on what happened. So here's maybe just a little backdrop. I won't go into too much detail, but all the sites, we basically put the MVR, the video recorder, in the nurseries, in the offices there, and hooked them up to the internet. Pretty basic. So all these can be viewed on a smartphone, PC, Android device, what have you. It's pretty universal from that perspective. As far as video footage, it really depended on how many cameras you had and how big that MVR was. We had some nurseries where we had 30-some cameras because it was 2 sites or 2 barns on that site. Typically, you would get 2 to 3 weeks of video stored on that MVR that you could go back and view. You know, if a vet wanted to view something or maybe something that went on, there was plenty of video to catch in between having some issues and what was going on. So in the end, it was all about what we wanted to see what people were doing and what's the pigs telling us. And so everybody's heard read the pig, every barn every day, and that's kind of what we wanted to do is say we need to get more data to figure out what's really going on here so we can correct the issue. So all these cameras they're PoEs, power over Ethernet, so they didn't have to have 110 power. All they had to have was the Cat 5 or Cat 6 cable ran out to them. These nurseries they're fairly long in context, so we couldn't just run the wires all the way back to the office, so we ended up putting some network switches in the middle of the barns, basically to bridge that gap. Most of the camera runs you couldn't run over 200 feet, or you'd just lose some of your connection issues. So just through design, we figured out what's the best way to install these, and then we had to protect that network switch. So you can kind of see the top parts of the switch sitting in a box. These are sealed boxes in the nursery hallways. We want to make sure we had robust conditions that with the robust conditions, we had a way to seal, protect these switches because we didn't want to be out there with the IT team all the time changing them out. So today, I don't believe we've changed a single network switch out. We're 5 years into using these, and we haven't really, the maintenance on this system has been very, very limited. We've had a couple cameras go out, and that's been about it. But connection-wise, the wires are all ran through the attics to the switches, so we get all the connections up out of the airspace, so we haven't dealt with connections with the cameras. And then the throughput back to the office has been pretty straightforward with really, really minimal interventions as far as maintenance-wise. So the one big one, don't know, probably talking a little Greek here, but 10 megabytes. We had to ensure we had upload speeds of 10 megabytes to be able to view some of this remotely. You can get by with some less, but it's just a little bit sketchy watching it on your device, if you will, from that perspective. So we've had pretty good luck, at least in our area. It hasn't been an issue getting internet to these sites. So location, and I think this is a big one. What did we want to see really? That's what kind of kicked it off. We didn't know, we want to view all the people activity? Did we want to view, see all the pigs, some of the pigs? So, we did start out some of these nurseries and put 2, 3 cameras in them and just said, what angles do we want to see? In the end, we ended up with just 1 camera in there. I think if you can get the view of what's the masses of the pigs telling you every single day, how they lay and what's going on after you make adjustments to ventilation, that was really, in the end, was once we kind of started getting some video footage, we'd move the cameras around. And these rooms, some of them are big. They're 1,500, 1,800 pigs in there. So trying to find that right location, we tried the corners, we put them on pedestals. In the end, we just landed right above the middle of the door, and we were able to get the right positioning of the cameras to get the views we wanted. So smaller rooms, same thing. Most of those ended up right over the top of the door just to get that view. So what did we learn? These would be the main 4 that probably came away from it. So the takeaways, the big one was pig stressors. Just what's going on with these pigs the day they come in, after we vaccinate. How much the team, were they crowding them up before sorting? Just things like that. And so when I talk pig stressors, we'll get into that in a little bit. Drafting and chilling of pigs. Ventilation. How's the inlet flowing into the barns, the air inlets? What's the pigs doing? What are they telling you? How are they laying? And so those were, that and ventilation adjustments were probably the three top ones. And then the added benefit of just having some biosecurity on the critical control points was a plus also, just to try to keep these pigs healthy. I think in the end, we put a lot of energy into these sow farms, and it was just, let's get these pigs through the nursery negative. And so that was another step of just adding those to the critical control points to try to get us more coaching moments for the team members on biosecurity and are we doing things right. And so I think in the end, when I've had a lot of questions after talks and saying, okay, what's all the people thought of this? What's the team members thought of this? And, initially, everybody said, hey, is this going to be the big brother watching over us all the time? And, in today's environment, I would say, with everybody having a camera in front of their face with their phone, and there's not many stores you don't go to today that doesn't have a camera watching you about everything you're doing through the checkout. And so really from a team member perspective, it was very, very short-lived. I mean, there were some questions on the front side, but after they realized we weren't there just to watch them, it was to help coach them, but also figure out what was going on. It really fell by the wayside really quick, and today they adapt it, and a lot of times when we make ventilation changes, they're willing to look at the video also or call the leadership and say, hey, what's things like? I made some adjustments in here. So diving into these, so pig stressors. So yeah, this was a big one, right off the get-go. This is just to be a view of some pigs, from the camera, showing you pigs all piled up. And so these rooms, if you will, so with a 5,000 flow, we wean 4 times a week in those. And so half the room would get filled, say, on a Tuesday. A Wednesday would fill the other half. And then they'll have one more room that production flow would also. So a 5,000 would have 2 rooms in a nursery. So this would be a view of pigs where the next morning the pigs came in the night before, and the ventilation, these barns would have 2 minimum ventilation fans in them. And so what was going on here is we had our set protocol, how many CFM per pig do you want to ventilate at? And so minimum vent was set right. The problem is with only half the room being filled, we had both minimum ventilation fans going, and you can tell the pigs clearly tell you they're not real happy with the environments of what's going on right now. And equally, so the root cause of that, one thing we figured out, just coach team, we got to shut one fan off. When you get the other group in, turn the other fan on. I mean, it was pretty straightforward, but without the pigs telling us and looking at those views when people aren't in there, we really wouldn't have ever known what was going on. So getting the pigs kicked off and really tackling that mortality that first 10 days was just critical in the success of that. So, and then the other big one was just vaccination. We had no clue. It was really an eye-opener to us. What's the pigs tell us in the hours and the days after vaccinating, the stress of that? And we went through a lot of work, and we spent months on it. Can we vaccinate differently? How are we picking them up? How are we, using sorting panels and scrunching them together? And so a lot of these things were really thought out of, we just got to get better as people, but in the end, it was just how much stress are we doing? It didn't matter if we vaccinated on arrival or 2 days later. We've seen the same effects from what the pigs told us in those hours and days after vaccination. And so when they go a whole day and not eat because they were stressed out from that process, it was a big kick to getting pigs started on feed right out of the nursery. So in the end, the action on vaccination was, how do we get this in? How do we get the vaccinations done in the farrowing house when they're on the mom? And so it took a lot. It wasn't a fan favorite, obviously, of all the sow farms. We got to go back to that. They weren't crazy about picking every pig up. But in the end, for our business, it was a win-win. We had better vaccinations being done with the sow farm picking up every pig and not trying to needle them when they're on the floor and scrunched up in corners. So it was kind of a double edge, where we seen the immediate effects right after this when vaccinations were moved to the sow farm. We just didn't see pictures like this anymore, depending on when you vaccinated. And we tried a lot of stuff. I mean, we'd up temperatures. We'd vaccinate, we up temperatures in the rooms, trying to relieve that stress on that pig of, whether they were feeling feverish. Tried to do anything for the environments we could, but the cause and effects of everything we did, every time you were going to up the temperature in those nursery rooms, higher you go, the higher the humidity. So then you kind of need to ventilate more to control that humidity. If you're pulling more air into the room, and then that's just another stressing point we had. So, yeah, another second one was obviously with challenges and pigs being stressed, we were grueling a lot more. I mean, nutritionist came in, says, you got to gruel, and so when you had pig stress, you had dehydrated pigs. Grueling seemed like it would help, trying to get those pigs back on feed and water and giving them that. But the downside of what we seen was how we grueled and the way we did it. We created worse environments. I mean, we had long trough panel gruel pans. So we had videos of pigs laying in the gruel pans at night. They would be in there during the day, then they'd be walking all over the pen. The pens were soaking wet, and so there was no dry place to lay. And then, like I said, the team members were trying to do the right thing, controlling humidity in there because everything was wet, and the pigs were wet, the environment was wet, so they'd up the minimum vent, then we would chill more pigs. And so it was just a revolving cycle of everything we were seeing. But in the end, without the pictures and knowing in the cameras of what was going on, we just really wouldn't have been able to figure much out. So in the end, on the gruel side of it, we figured out if we can take the stress away the first few days, we don't have dehydrated pigs. The pigs will start on feed just fine. And today we have some gruel pans in the fallout recovery pens. And that's it. They're not throughout the whole nursery trying to get every pig started on feed because the pigs are starting just fine without that, not having all the stressors early in the process. So, yeah, and on the bottom, another action was just how we had some nurseries did a better job than others, but then we'd have some come in there cleaning out gruel pans. They'd use a garden hose, and all that did was just soak the pen where they dumped it. Just the wet environment was not real complimentary to the pigs starting them out by what we were doing in there. So in the ventilation part of this drafting, we'll kind of hit on a bunch of key things that we learned from the video, and just what's all the pigs, what are they telling us all the time? And so through that process, we would have, taking you back to maybe the barn style and some of the things we were going through. Some of our best production was in some finishers. We were starting these nursery pigs out on slats until these got built. And that barn consistently was doing better than our new barns. And so in the end, with the cameras being installed, some things we learned was, what was all different at that other site that the production or the metrics at least were better. We maybe didn't have the weight going out of there, but we definitely didn't have the death loss. And so in the end, what was really interesting was the barn style really mattered to how you ventilated. And what I mean by that was we had a very cookie cutter SOP on how we ventilate. Teams had it of how many CFM per pig, and they'd follow that. And so what we went back to was the old barn that curtain sided, slats, and nursery pigs in there, and basically we had no air coming out of any of the inlets. So they were running their correct CFM and everything, but the barn leaked so much there wasn't drafts in there. And so we weren't pulling air in and bouncing it off everything in the room or dropping it right to the floor. It was just coming kind of in the leakage at the top of the curtain. The minimum vent fan really was just pulling it throughout the whole barn. And in the end, the pigs just weren't ever stressed that bad from those events. When we built the new nurseries, you can imagine they're airtight, brand new construction. We made sure they were sealed tight. I mean, we wanted it all cocked up. We wanted to make sure the air was at the right CFM was coming out of the inlets. And so what we've learned with the air side of this was really, it was really a big one for the team to understand airflow. And what I mean by that is, by following these SOPs, they thought they were doing the right thing, and we thought they were doing the right thing, but in the end we were doing more damage than good. And from that, it was the barns that were sealed tighter were bringing in more air than what we were from our original SOPs, and we just had to change the ventilation. So today, through our nurseries and even the new ones, we don't have a standard SOP on ventilation. It's what the pigs tell us is how we're going to ventilate. There's some guidelines. We got to control some things, but in the end, it's what's the pig, read the pig, what's the cameras telling you, how are they doing, and that's how we ventilate. So we might be 5, 10 CFM more in another nursery than a different one, and a lot of that's just dependent on the leaks in the barn and how the construction was on that site. So in the end, no two barns are the same when you ventilate, and when you're trying to troubleshoot some of those things, just take that in the context. It's usually going to come down to those things. They're all set up perfectly from the beginning with the ventilation guys of CFMs, and here's what you need, but how that air comes in is dramatically different when you're doing it. So here we'll cover the barn style air inlets, ceiling obstructions, heater blowers, door leakage, and then somatic pressurization. So one of the first things we seen past the vaccination, as we kept going through this, was we noticed from the camera footage that we had pens of pigs throughout a nursery on the cameras laying differently. We'd have some pigs crowded up. We'd have some laying perfectly. It made zero sense, and it wasn't consistent anywhere through the nursery. And so we couldn't figure out, is there something wrong with this pen? Is there, are these pigs getting sick or whatever it was? And what it came down to was these air inlets we had in there were leaking. They were leaking right out of the bifold. So these nurseries are kind of automated. They have all actuated inlets in them. And so the bifold on these inlets were leaking vertically right to the floor. And so tough to see, unless you find a really nice cold night, you really don't feel it. You couldn't really feel it walking underneath there, but it was real clear. There was a couple real humid, high dew point mornings. It was cold out, and you could see it on the camera, the air coming straight down. So we went in there, did some fogging, took some measurements, and we realized, gosh, this is kind of the root cause of the laying patterns. And so through that, it was a pretty simple fix. Once we figured it out, this bubble wrap's still up today. We haven't really had to change much out. Maybe every couple of years we'll swap out the old stuff. But we knew the air inlets were still going to leak. That we weren't going to fix that. The bifold was there. The goal was, if it's going to leak, let's get the air going out horizontally instead of vertically right to the pigs. And so this changed stuff overnight with what you've seen on camera. It was just, we went through whole nurseries and do them in a day. The next day, you wouldn't see any inconsistency as far as how pigs laid in pens. It just, overnight, it fixed it. And it was just one of those aha moments. It wasn't a big big expenditure of fixing it. It was just a couple screws and some bubble wrap. But what it did for the consistency of understanding the behavior of those pigs was a big one. So. And then around just, we went a step further and just made sure, it's an annual thing, we go around and make sure all the caulking's good around the top of the inlets where it's against the aluminum ribs. All those areas seem, everything's going to leak, but just controlling the ventilation, and there's been a big one, and finding those little points that maybe stress those pigs is the goal for that. So. Yeah, back to construction. This is just kind of a view of these large nursery rooms that we built with the new construction. And there's just, one thing we learned and we weren't very engaged with when we said, let's get these built, was just the construction of them. And what I mean by that would be putting really some input into what's air all doing when it comes into a room. And what, from the cameras we learned, obviously obstructions were diverting air straight to the floor. If it was coming out of an inlet, whether it was an electrical line, feed line, or even sometimes the aluminum ribs, if the aluminum ribs were different in a nursery depending on how they put the aluminum in there. So really we weren't very proactive on those, but with the new construction we are very on point now with where's inlets going to go. We don't let the construction person just say point A to point B. The ventilation gurus, it's all based off what's air going to hit and how do we keep it. We basically want to get the fresh air in and get the humidity out. And so we changed some things in our nurseries where we could, but it really came down to we had certain air inlets in there that were right next to water lines or the electrical lines or in some feed lines, depending on the height of the nurseries, but most of these are above them. But we would go in and say, well, these inlets here are really high prone to stress these pigs out in this first few days. So those are inlets we can't use. They got an X on them. We can't use those in that first 10 days of starting pigs out. And so that was a pretty easy fix. But, the barn construction of these, if you're going to do new construction, just be involved in that process. We learned a lot from it. And like I said, their whole goal is I got water nipples here, I got electrical here, I need to get it from point A to point B. There's other ways they can do it in the nursery. It doesn't cost you any more money. You just got to be on top of that on the front side. So you make sure that air, when it comes in, is not an obstruction from the inlets. Sealing around doors was another big one. Video footage, pigs told us these first few pens in a room. It was just amazing. The inlets took care of a lot of it, but we'd still have certain locations, whether it was a back door or even just the front door. I mean, air's going to take the path of least resistance at every single stop. And so first few pens were told that the pigs were laying way away from the door and kind of pile it up in the back, and it was a pretty easy fix. We tried opening more inlets, just, hey, we got too much pressure in the room, whatever's going on, not enough inlets open, but it didn't fix it. That air still was going to come underneath that door. So we just used some simple garage door material you use on your house and sealed up the side of these doors. So instantaneously when we did that, we didn't have the stressed pigs. If you just put a scoop on the back of the door that you can screw to it, that'll divert that air at least up and away from those pigs so they're comfortable in those first few pens. And then attic pressurization was a big one. It was one as we kind of kept going down and knocking things out. This one was kind of a little pesky and just trying to figure it out. And really what it amounted to, all of our ventilation controllers are remote. We have access to all the ventilation data, graphs, like many of them out there today. So we were able to marry looking at heater run times and the video footage, trying to figure out on very windy days, we had laying patterns really goofy in the barns. And so really what it amounted to with these barns, as you can imagine, with the jet air and all the air goes through the attic, we had air, even with curtains all 100% shut, we had air getting into that attic, pressurizing it. And it'd typically be on the cold days that kill you the most. And so air was getting in the attic, and it had nowhere to go. So if you had inlets opened in there, it's going to push down through those rooms and then out the fans. So we had video footage of fans, minimum vent fans, and even stage 2 fans that minimum vent fans were supposed to be on 45%, and they looked like they were 100, and the stage 2 fan was 100, and that wasn't even on. And so there was so much pressurization in the attic, it was pushing down. It had to get into the rooms or get somewhere, and it was stressing the pigs out. And so all the heater run times validated it. Typically, it was on the end rooms. We'd have the end rooms of the nurseries took the most, or the 2 end rooms on the nursery, depending on the layout. But those rooms typically had the highest run times. And so in the end, it was we took readings from inlets and realized, hey, fans are only running certain. There's no way we should have this much air coming here. What do we do? And so a lot of it was troubleshooting. Guys were shutting inlets. Let's stop the air from coming in. So we would pop all the inlets up. Well, then the wind died, and they'd have to go back out there at night and open the inlets up again, the ones we shut to minimize that air being pushed in. So what did we do? We had to get rid of the pressure in the attic. And so you can see up there, it's a 48-inch or a 50-inch shutter, if you will. It's just, we cut a hole in the side of the nurseries to relieve the pressure. And on windy days, just amazing. You drive by, you'll see those things straight out, relieving the pressure from the attic. Did it 100% solve all the, depending on how windy it is and what's going on, it didn't 100% correct it, but we just don't see the laying pattern differences on those pigs. We don't see them stressed out, and we decreased the run time of those heaters significantly in those end rooms. So. And as we were ticking away at some of the things, we would see different events happen or different laying patterns, piling pigs, which made no sense after we kind of got some of these things corrected. So towards the end, we were just kind of hitting the last few things of what was going on. This one kind of goes down to the people side of things of how do we make decisions, and this was in and around humidity. So this case study was done. Simply, we had the events happening where we would talk to the team and say, okay, you made a ventilation adjustment. Walk me through that. And so we would go through that process with them, say, yeah, you had a high humidity reading, you went up, this is what we should be doing, we got to get rid of it. Through that, we'd look at all the barn ventilation data, the graphs and everything, and say, yeah, everything looks correct. And so in the end, we just said there's got to be more to this story, but because the pigs after these events of them changing ventilation was worse. And so what we did here with the humidity was trying to understand better what's going on in the rooms when they're doing chores. And so what you see here is basically it's a half a day snapshot, if you will, of humidity in a room. So we took, I think, 6 sensors, hung them in a room, and these are sensors you can't leave in there for the whole time. So during all these studies, we would take them out of the room after a half day, clean them up, get them back in the room. So this is just a morning in a nursery of what went on with humidity. And so what we learned from this was, pigs arrived, and we had mat feeding protocols in place. So where the arrows are is when mat feeding events are happening, and or the little spikes in there. And so what was going on in there is the team members were coming in and do chores, activity increased in the room. They're stirring all the pigs up, so pigs are respirating more. And with all the activity in there, humidity was jumping in the room. So as we're all taught, even back to my early days of doing things is, you hang the Kestrel in the room, and as you're doing chores, take the humidity reading and make adjustments. You're in there. And so the people were doing the right thing in here. The challenge was humidity went right back to normal within the hours after these events. So humidity did pop in the room when they took these readings, But making a ventilation adjustment at that time was not the right decision. And so we had several examples where we would go back to coach team members and we were able to show them. Pigs went right back to normal laying patterns in those hours afterwards. The events where we popped the minimum vent on the last mat feeding, pigs went all night and were piled up because we upped the minimum ventilation too much. And so this was really an aha moment for all of our team members in coaching. You know, let's face it, with turnover and you know, a lot of our team members aren't ventilation experts. So really trying to zero in on this and understand what we're trying to get done with the air. And especially early when you're keeping nurseries 86, 87 degrees, starting them out, it's really just, we got to get enough air in there to grab the moisture and get it out the fan. And so making adjustments based off humidity is not a big one in our system anymore. It's more off the laying patterns. You know, obviously we got the soaking wet, humid environments, and something's going wrong. We got to make some adjustments, but they're far and few between now of what we do on weekends. And if there is an adjustment made, it's made by the leadership. More than one person's going to make the adjustment. And then the goal is we're checking these cameras before we leave at the end of the day, or at least at night. And then if we have to, we can revert those back. We can revert those changes back remotely and change the minimum vent fan back or up the temperature back in the room or whatever's going on. So from that, this was probably one of the bigger ones that we did figure out just from the team member coaching point of it. And nobody was doing anything wrong. They were following the book, but we didn't realize how much humidity was spiking just during chores. So yeah, last thing I got, just a few videos. I'll show some footage of what we've captured from these videos. Predominantly, these are just on the critical control points and loadouts of what you kind of see and what, you know, how we use this for coaching team members and verifying processes. So in the end, I think, you know, all these, we trust everybody, but we just got to verify it. So, and this is just an ante room, obviously, with the bench protocol, and I don't know how well everybody can see it, but it's a person coming in the door with the booty process and then getting over the bench. Here's a D&D room. Through all the farms, this has been a good one to coach processes on. You know, you kind of, seems like if somebody's not verifying this video footage when they do load them once or twice a week, there's just a lot of coaching moments you can have and tell the team member, great job, or, you know, what we're doing here to kind of help coach them up. This one's not a video, but just cameras are on these pass-throughs from biosecurity. How are we bringing in lunches? What's all being brought into the farm? Are we following the processes? And then from the movement perspective, this is a nursery loadout. Lots of great things can be used with these. How we do them bringing pigs in, loading them out, and then what's all going on with sanitation and biosecurity after the process of movements are happening. And then an internal biosecurity one. Probably one of the bigger ones that we really didn't expect to be monitoring was just how well is our wash process and detergent prior to, you know, we had a protocol of detergent's got to go down, be applied for at least set there 20 minutes, then power wash. If it dries, you're supposed to restart and reapply the detergent. And so when everything was followed, it was pretty amazing when we had hot water and all these things were being verified. And to the tune of that, I mean, mortality measured by just that sanitation process was a 0.5% mortality. And it's kind of amazing when you think about it. Oh, it's just power washing. Who do we usually send in on those processes? And nobody loves doing it, but the process is so important, especially when you're doing all in, all out, or groups just killing that bug load in between and doing a great job with it. So yeah, you can kind of see the video footage and what you get. This was a smaller nursery of just somebody in there power washing. And but just what's amazing when you think of hot water, it was pretty clear. I mean, we had nurseries, whether you had a team in there washing them at night or after hours or what was going on, you can clearly tell if they're using hot water by the steam in a room. It's really interesting. So you go ask them and they say, well, the heater doesn't work on the power washer, or they had it off because it was steamy in the room. But all them processes were critical in validating these for helping the team even. Once they seen it and it's easier to take care of pigs and you do the processes right, it's a win-win for everybody. And then last but not least, kind of on that team member coaching side, this is just a video. Pigs just came into a nursery and you got a couple people in there. There's coaching going on and communication, and you have that view of what's happening with the pigs every day. And so I'd say for the leadership, this has been a big one, just especially when we got leaders over multiple nurseries. They can go back and view things. And in the end, like I said, the teams have really embraced it. There's a lot more positive stuff talked about than the negative. And that's what really, if you use it right, that's what comes out of it. So that's about all I have. If anybody's, I can show you some views on my iPad of what this actually looks like if you want to come up afterwards. And how we've, kind of looks from that view, and I'd be willing to share that with you and willing to take some questions. So,
is it working? Hold on. I actually have a question for you. Can you talk about some of the HR processes and policies about camera use?
The what?
HR, human resource policies and procedures for using cameras as a part of coaching, but also to everybody knows up front what's going on.
Yeah, sure. HR's loved them. A couple of our larger finisher facilities also, where you're dealing with maybe the bigger animals. Nurseries, not as much. We've gone back and done a lot of coaching just from the safety perspective. Are we using the panels? How many pigs are we loading out at a time? And so from that perspective, we've decreased a lot of claims from the safety side of it. On attendance-wise, we use biometrics anyways from people clocking in and out, but from the safety aspect of the cameras being in there, it's really helped our claims.
No, it's more educating the employees through human resource policies. Like in your onboarding process, you talk about camera use and what that means, and that they understand it.
Yeah, sure. Do we do that, or?
Can you talk about how you got that in place so that there is acceptance by the employees?
Yeah, sure. It's pretty upfront in the hiring process, but I would say, word of mouth's been a big advertisement with our business of how we recruit, and there just hasn't been, when we bring up the cameras and that they're out there has not been a big pushback. Like I said, a lot of people are just used to cameras being around, and so from that perspective, hiring people, and we, like I said, we don't use these in a negative way very often. There's some times where you've alarm calls, I would say. How quick did somebody get to an alarm call when power went out? There's been some really good coaching moments with some of that isn't always the most friendly when somebody says they go right away. And so there's some things there that we've used in coaching moments that helped our business out. But from an HR perspective, it's up front. They know they're there, but it's been pretty simple. So.
Andy, who routinely monitors the recordings and how many hours of use is that?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, so Todd's question was on how often do we review this? And I would say from the leadership that runs the nurseries, I mean, you really have the critical point, the critical time in a nursery is that first 10 days, right? And so with the nice thing about our all in, all out way we flow things is we usually only have 2 to 3 nurseries in that kind of turntable of the 10 days. And so the leadership will really actively watch those and coach the team members and really looking at video footage. I would say 3 times a day, they're at least peeking through, seeing what pigs look like, and especially if they know a ventilation change is made. I spend a fair amount of time on there, Todd, and just to try to help out with coaching and what we're all doing. And that's kind of married with our ventilation system. So if I see something goofy ventilation-wise that maybe popped up on our charts or an alert, I'm able to go back and review that data in the nursery and say, what's all going on here? What happened? Heater blowers, you know, I didn't cover that a lot, but that was a big one we figured out too. We had, with the new technology in heaters and the smart sense, we put the best technology in these nurseries, and it turned out to actually hurt us a little bit because the fan blower on these was running all the time. And so when you talk about some of these silly things, propane was only coming on at 25%, supposed to be saving us propane. Well, in the end, the blower circulating air in that room the whole time was drafting pigs. You know, and it's just, you always want the next best thing and what's going to help, but in the end, it actually, we went back and turned these all, they kick on 100%, they're on for just a short time because of that, those silly things like that. But to your point, I would say, boy, on average, I don't know how many hours are spent looking at them a week. It's a fair amount, but I think having that luxury of, you know, you can flip through a nursery pretty fast and look at, there's 8 rooms in these with 15,000 pigs. You can flip through them multiple times a day and just see what the activity level is pretty quick. And then if you get a deep dive in and look back, it's pretty simple. You can just dial back the thing to whatever time of the day you want to look and watch that. And it kind of monitor, you know, the problem with nurseries is you constantly got movement. So you don't have the nice little dot on there saying, well, there's movement at this time. There's movement all the time. So you kind of got to go to the time when people are in there and kind of see what happened.
Have you had the opportunity yet to use like artificial intelligence to look at some of those and try and pick some of that stuff out, or is it that far yet?
With the current cameras in the nurseries, we haven't done anything with, Paul. We do have a trial starting right now with the AI part of it, and so that'll be on an individual pig. So every pig will be tracked. We'll know how many miles a day it puts on, how often it goes to the drinker, and so that's actively in place in conjunction with that. And then, you know, that'll be the next step to really understand that behavior process of, you know, what. You know, don't know, it's not going to be economical yet to get there of every single pig, which one's got a fever and which one's not getting to the feeder every single day. We'll know it on a small scale. And kind of the goal with that is maybe help figure out penning design and what's all going on. The initial stuff that's been done is just really interesting on how many miles these pigs put on in the morning after they're on arrival, and just by putting up some simple panels, it decreased it in half, and so they're not as curious on what's going on the other side of the pen from them. So that'll be the next step, Paul. I mean, obviously, as I look forward, it's all how do we get more efficient with labor to, you know, people can take care of more pigs and get to the hot spots in these barns quicker to where the pigs need it the most. I think everybody's dipping their toe in it a little bit right now, and there's a few players getting really serious about it. So, great question, though.